Hello, 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 and welcome to the 5th episode of Mixed Media Reviews Season 3. My name is Kelsey, and today I'm going to be talking about a TV show. This week's TV show is Lockwood and Co. on Netflix. When the show first came out and popped up on my home screen, I thought, this is the perfect show for me. I love teen dramas, and I really love the ones that have supernatural elements to it. And this one seemed to be the mix of my two favorite shows, Buffy and Veronica Mars. I mean, they're a psychical, is that a word? They're a psychical detective agency, so it's basically the same thing. Google describes Lockwood and Co. as the following. A girl with psychic abilities joins two teen boys at the ghost hunting agency Lockwood and Co. to fight the deadly spirits plaguing London, doing their best to save the day without any adult supervision. Which, I guess is a fine summary. It's a little bit boring, maybe. If you listen to my previous episode, just insert that summary here. Lucy Carlisle is awesome. She teams up with Anthony Lockwood and George, not Cubbins, but Karim. And that's really the only change to the summary, is that George has a different name. So let's dive in, shall we? I was so enthralled with this show from episode 1. I had everything I could possibly want. British stuff, ghosts that can murder people, drama, but the good kind of drama. A possible budding romance, great characters, great cast. I was hooked. I got through the show fairly quickly and have watched it repeatedly. I actually just rewatched it a little bit ago as well. I can sometimes get a little obsessive, passionate about TV or books, and this one definitely did that to me. Show-wise, Never Have I Ever and Julie and the Phantoms have done this to me recently as well. Have you ever finished watching a show just to start the first episode again? Because that's what these shows do to me. I did that to Heartstoppers the other day. I also read the first volume of the graphic novel and then jumped right back into the TV show again because I needed to know how it ended, even though I know how it ends. I'm currently rewatching Wednesday for the millionth time. I throw it on to have some company. And they're great shows, so might as well watch them over and over again until I get sick of them, which will you never. Anyway, since basically everything I said in the previous episode applies to this show as well, I'm going to focus more so on the differences and, spoiler alert, how I loved them too. First up is, of course, George Cubbins is no longer a chubby redheaded white kid. Instead, he's a skinny brown-haired Iranian boy. He's also not quite as annoying and a bit more hygienic, which I am okay with those changes. Honestly, most of the changes that they make in the show either make sense because it's a TV show rather than a book, kind of different format, or I think they add a bit more depth to the characters. Many of the more noticeable changes in the TV show are really just changing the race or the ethnicity or even gender of a character. Along with George, Flo, and Barnes have been changed as well. I think the age of Kipps is different because in the books I think he's more of an adult than in the show where he is kind of reaching that point but hasn't quite reached it yet. I think the number of people on his team have changed as well. I don't remember if their characters changed much since there wasn't a lot about them in kind of either. Especially in the show at first, or at least that I could remember. The researcher, Joplin, was also a woman instead of a man in the show. So, yeah, some minor kind of changes, but I think the changes that they did were fine because it still matched the book's essence for the most part. The individual characters' personalities were still largely the same. The main plot points were still, all hit, and honestly, that's what we all want in an adaptation. While I did watch the show before reading the books, I think the show was fantastic at adapting the books. While others who are perhaps more used to the books before the show came out may feel otherwise, I'm not sure. I felt it was a great example of how you can make modification and updates to a story while still being true to its origin. I have seen a lot of support for the show though, so I think even those who love the books first would largely agree with me. This show also provided us a bit more insight into Lockwood and George, as this was no longer exclusively from Lucy's perspective. I thought it was great that we saw a bit more from them, and I am so bummed that we didn't get to see them through the other events in the books. there are other things that happen later on in the books that I would really love to know what exactly was happening with them. I love when we get an adaptation in book or movie or TV or whatever it is, where we get a little bit more information than what we've already known about, whether that's a different perspective or someone's interior thoughts or whatever it is. I like getting just a little bit more than we get from the original source. That's why the first book that they came out for the Julie and the Phantoms wasn't great, because it was like a watered down version of the show, and we really got like nothing else, and we sometimes even got less than what was in the show. The second book was actually pretty good. I liked it, but because it was set after the events of the first season, so we get a little bit of what was going on, but then we get flashbacks of some past stuff. So that was, more than what we got from the show, so I was much happier with the second book. Anyway, let's see what else. One thing that they changed that I really want to know more about and how it would have played out was the depiction of Leopold Winkman in the books. He was just as much of a dirtbag as his parents were. I think he was even maybe slightly older, but in the show, he's, a little bit younger, and he seems to be a lot more gentle, more kind. I really want to know how he would have handled some events that happened later in the books, like what side he would have chosen, and how those events would kind of play out. I'm trying to be kind of vague because I don't want to give spoilers for the books. So if you've read the books, I think you know what I mean. It definitely could have made the books and the TV show veer a bit more away from each other, what happens in the story. So I'm really bummed that we don't get to see how that all plays out. What didn't I like? Well, I certainly didn't like that Netflix has once again canceled a unique show without even giving it a chance. It's so frustrating that there isn't more transparency with these shows. I really hope that the writer strike and the actor strikes help make it more obvious how to support shows like this. I hope it makes it so that they focus more on creating lasting content than, throwing things at the wall to see if it sticks. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it seems like they're not great at keeping sci-fi and fantasy shows running for very long. Warrior Nun, which I actually thought was kind of terrible, and I stopped watching it, was also canceled, but then they brought it back. But so many other shows have not been brought back that I loved. Of course, Julie and the Phantoms. The show Cursed was really good. The OA lasted, I think, a couple seasons before they canceled it. Obviously, Lockwood and Co. And there were more that I began watching but stopped because I knew it would be renewed, like 1899 and Half Bad. And I'm sure there are more that I'm forgetting. And of course, this isn't just Netflix. The same is true for all streaming services. But it's really frustrating to really like a show, and then it just gets taken off the air. And then you see other shows that keep getting more seasons, and you're like, that is literal garbage. Why does that get seasons? And the show that I liked did not. I feel like they need to figure out a better way to make it more transparent of, what are the views that they're getting? What makes it stay versus what makes, them cancel it. Because we don't really get that anymore. There's not a lot of information about how many views things get. I mean, a show could be number one for weeks, and yet it still won't, get a second season. So I don't know what the answer is, obviously, but I hope they figure it out, and I hope that the strikes that are going on will kind of force their hand to figure out what they're doing with the streaming services, because there's just so much content. And, we don't have commercials anymore, so how do you advertise for shows? How do you get people to know about them? And I feel like that's where a lot of this is kind of falling flat, is, I only really know about shows that are coming out because it's on my, the top of my Netflix page, or, the top of whatever I'm watching. And so how else was I supposed to find out about these shows? I don't know. I'm kind of rambling about other things now. But yeah, that's the only thing I didn't like about this show, was that it got canceled. Because really, it's just a really good show, and I really loved it. I still recommend watching the show, even though it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. If you really want to know what's in that room, just check out the books. The end of the second book actually tells you a little bit more, so you don't even need to necessarily read the third book. But it doesn't get into more about that until later on in the third book. It doesn't even pick up right away. So I definitely recommend the show. Definitely recommend the books. They're both really good. You can watch the show, and then I would still read the first and second book because things are slightly different, but they're also worth reading. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the Lockwood and Co. TV show on Netflix. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast. Please leave me a comment and let me know if you agreed or disagreed with anything I mentioned here, or if you have any suggestions. You can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, probably. Please join me next time where I will be reviewing the Teen Wolf movie. It's going to be fun. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye!